Welcome to the OddsBreakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 66 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet me at OBKiev. Tweet us at the OddsBreakers. Follow us on social media / the OddsBreakers. This episode is being sponsored by mybookie.ag for a 50% bonus. Please visit MyBookie. Use the promo code TheOddsBreakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor our podcast and website, we'd love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and for $17.99 a month, you'll get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 more, you can have all that and become a patron subscriber, get the podcast a little early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free Picks newsletter subscriber. Huge slate today in college to cover. The NFL, lots of games, 4 bye weeks, and we have a fantastic handicapper coming on for the first time. Alan Cashman is going to come on to break down some of those games. He's been a contributor to the OddsBreakers for some time now, and I'm very excited to finally get our schedules to match up and bring him on. Now I'm actually happy to welcome a professional handicapper that's been a contributor to the OddsBreakers for some time now, Mr. Alan Cashman. You can follow him on Twitter at the Cashman Wins. You can find his plays actually at the oddsbreakers.com. How's the season treating you, Alan?
Well, we're starting to pick it up. We got off to a slow start, but picking it up, looking good. We're 8-2 in our last 10 NFL plays, so pretty happy about that. Nice.
I'm actually limping into basketball right now. And just real small stuff, but I'll tell you, lots changed in basketball in college. The 3-point line being 1.7 back has affected some of these teams, man. I'm seeing a lot of more bricks than normal, and I think it has to do with just their immaturity and the fact that it's it's that much farther back. It makes it a lot harder. The unders were actually hitting the first week here, so that's definitely affects some of those teams from last year. I'm thinking maybe a way I'm going to start fading is just look at the high 3-point teams from last year that just chucked it up, and it seems a little bit harder. But I'm learning too. With all rule changes, everybody learns. So very cool that it's starting to get ramped up for you as well. And we're holding on here. A lot of even weeks we had, and started out fantastic, and then a bunch of even weeks. But we're going to break the spell, be a little bit more profitable this week, and that's what I'm hoping for. I want to start out with a question for you, bud. What kind of angles do you look for this late in the football season? Because college, we only have a couple regular season games left. The NFL is a little bit past halfway, but they're starting to get serious into playoff time. What are the angles that you look for?
Well, it's amazing how fast this college football season has gone. It's hard to believe it's only a few weeks left. But, we get to this point in the year, a lot of these conference teams have played similar opponents. They've played common opponents, and that's always a big factor when I'm looking at games. I like to see how they did against the same team and how they performed. That helps me a lot, make a decision. And then at this time of year, what teams have given up? Are they bowl eligible? Do they have a chance? Are they playing for anything? Are coaches on their way out the door? Mm-hmm. Things like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of coaches that are securely on the hot seat, and Dan Quinn was one of them. And all of a sudden, he beats the Saints, but I don't think that's enough. 2 wins. We'll see what happens there. But the team played for him this game. I'm not so sure if they'll play for him this next coming game, but we'll see how that comes to fruition. And obviously, the teams with 7 losses are pretty much out of bowl contention, especially when you're in the group of 5. That's ones you want to fade on the road, possibly. It's not your only part of your handicap, obviously, but I certainly wouldn't bet on a road team with 7 losses in any situation. And some of those teams that are close, 5 or 6 wins, especially the ones with 5 wins, they want to be in bowl contention. They might try a little bit extra harder. So even though they might be playing a big opponent, they might put a little bit extra into it. And I've noticed that's been a pretty good payoff for me. So that obviously clusters of injuries that have been happening throughout the season too. You don't want to put too much on them, my man. Any last thoughts on that?
Nope, I agree with you 100% on that. Definitely look at the injuries because those always play a factor, and especially this late in the year, teams are beat up, and if you've got a team that really isn't playing for anything, you also need to look at the injury report because they'll sit guys as well. So
yeah, absolutely, and especially a couple people in the trenches could change the whole game. So that's real important, my man. Well, let's get into a couple games, and I know that it's kind of early in the week for you. Obviously, these are some of the bigger games we have. We're not going to necessarily have a side on these, but we might have a lean because a lot of the listeners want to hear some of the bigger games, and obviously we have a couple smaller ones. And we'll start out with a smaller one here: Tulane versus Temple. This spread kept going up and up. It is now up to +6. Over under is around 55. Have you got a chance to look at this one?
Looked at it a little bit. I was really high on Tulane coming into the season, and they've had their ups and their downs, but they're definitely not the same team on the road. And really, with both these teams, I don't know what to expect from week to week. Memphis was a common opponent. They had a 2-point. Memphis lost by 2 at Temple, so that was a pretty good win for the Owls there. And then they come back that week, so Tulane got to feel their wrath the following week in Memphis, and Memphis routed them 47-17. So Temple followed up their home win over Memphis, and they had 2 horrible losses: a 24-point home loss, or a 24-point loss at SMU, and then a home loss to UCF. They lost 63-21. So just terrible showings. Tulane followed up that loss to Memphis. They had a close loss to Navy. It turned out close. They were down most of the game and came back in the second half and lost there at a field goal at the end. And then Tulane, like I said, they fell behind 24-0. They allowed Navy 7 yards per carry in that game. So that's a problem. Temple's not really a running team, but Tulane does seem to struggle more against teams with good run games. And when Temple comes in, they're only number 94 in rushing in the country. So that's not really their forte. Tulane's pass defense has been pretty good, and they're holding opponents to 52.3 completion percentage this season, so I've done a good job there. They've only had 2 games this season where opponents have thrown more than 1 touchdown in a game. So I don't know if Temple's going to be able to get any kind of run going here, but Temple's been really good against the pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about the spread going up like that to 6? That's Temple. I've noticed they're pretty good at home. So obviously that Memphis game, Memphis did outgain them by a little bit, but not by a lot. Temple, then you thought Maryland was good when they beat Maryland, then you realized that they're not.
Yeah,
not at
as
all.
You say, fake news.
They were fake news and frauds, man. It was obviously things change when that happens, and you have to remember adjust your power ratings when you realize a team was actually not that good. When it comes into it. But one thing that I noticed about this game is that Tulane has a pretty big look ahead here. Central Florida's coming up, and that's at home. And now they have a road game at Temple here. What I do like is Temple does stop the run, and that's Tulane's forte. They 3.77 yards per rush. And so that's kind of why I think this spread is going to be very hard for Temple to cover, in my opinion here. It's a look-ahead spot for Tulane. I definitely have a strong lean to Temple in this. Any final thoughts?
I tend to agree with you on that. It's hard for me to back Tulane by nearly a touchdown on the road right now. If you look at the averages, which I do look at a lot, the home and away, it favors Temple covering in this one. I think Tulane's probably the more talented team overall if you look at it, but can't trust them right now. And I actually use some analytics like for game projections that I like to compare my information with. I usually use 4 different ones to kind of throw things up against. Only 2 of them have info for this game right now, and both of them are projecting Temple to cover for what it's worth.
Oh, there you go. So, that could be the side after obviously this big line move here. So, kind of we'll keep an eye on that one. But let's move into a much bigger game. As a matter of fact, College game day is heading down to Waco. We have Oklahoma versus Baylor, and Baylor is a 10-point home dog. Over-under is 67.5. I mean, this spread obviously tells you that a 9-0 team being at home as a 10-point dog, it tells you that Baylor is overrated. But at the same time, Chris Felica tweeted something real interesting. He said that in the last 40 years, the only time a 9-0 team or better was a home dog in the regular season by at least 7 points was 1993. The only time when Notre Dame beat Florida State as a 7-point dog. And there's been 6 other times that it's happened, and the dog won outright 4 of those 6 times. So it tells me when a 9-0 team is that disrespected, they show up here. But at the same time, high-powered Oklahoma, I'm not so sure Baylor is going to be a public dog here. I think the public might jump on Oklahoma here. Did you get to look at this one?
I looked at it. I'm lean Oklahoma. I think, as you say, and as we've said about some of these teams, I think Baylor might be a little fake news as well. We get into a common opponent. Well, first, Baylor's 4-10 against the spread their last 14 home games. So, and what really worries me about them is earlier in the season, they had the inability to put away a team like Rice. It was a road game, but the Bears, they failed to cover, and they won 21-13. It was pretty unconvincing. Baylor had a couple of turnovers in that one, and Rice in the game actually won the time of possession. So, like I told you earlier, we look at common opponents. So we get into this. We got Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. Now, Baylor beat Kansas State. The score was 31-12, but it wasn't really a dominant performance statistically. Baylor was up 17-6 after 3 quarters, and then Kansas State handed Oklahoma their only loss. And then after that slow start for Oklahoma, they just still nearly came back and won the game. Kansas State basically just came in and looking to control the clock and keep Oklahoma's offense off the field. And Kansas State controlled the clock 38 minutes and some change, like 21 minutes, and Oklahoma still put up 41 against them in that loss. So now the two that really do stand out here is Texas Tech and West Virginia. Now, Oklahoma put up 50-plus on both of those teams and held them both to 16 or less. One of them had 16, the other had 14. I can't remember which was which, but total domination really by Oklahoma in those games. And Baylor struggled at home against both of these teams. They only beat West Virginia 17-14 2 weeks ago, and then they could only get by Texas Tech by a field goal back in late September. Mm-hmm. So in Baylor's offense, they've only outgained their conference opponents by combined by more than 85 yards once all season. So Oklahoma outgained Texas Tech by 330 yards and West Virginia by 318 yards. So Baylor outgained basically in those 2 games. Oklahoma's outgained 2 opponents by over 600 yards in conference, while Baylor has outgained all of their conference opponents by only 407 yards combined, and 234 of those yards were against the West Virginia. In that one game, they only put up 17. So I think maybe, Baylor's going to have to play defense in this one. If it gets into a shootout, they're in trouble.
Oh, absolutely. And they probably need to eliminate possessions by running the ball. That's their only shot here. They do average 5 yards per carry, and that's what they're going to be. That's going to be their only saving grace. They don't want to go punch for punch with Oklahoma there, man. Because Oklahoma, the more possessions they have, the more that spread gets fatter and fatter, and they're going to have their margin gets bigger and bigger there. I absolutely see that. Yeah, and I didn't bet this game. The thing that you look at here is double-digit dogs. Why is Oklahoma choking these situations? Is Jalen Hurts the real deal here? I don't know. Matt Rules just kind of seems like one of those guys that really puts belief into his team. So I think this spread is probably pretty close to on, personally. As a matter of fact, I think my number's about 9.
Yep.
So it's not even that far off it here. And if this thing went crazy up to 12, 13 points, then it might be something I'd be interested in. But real interesting that home dogs that are 9-0 have such a huge covering rate, though. That is very interesting to me. I cannot wait to watch this game because I agree. You look at Baylor playing Stephen F. Austin, an FCS team, 56-17, and Texas San Antonio, one of the worst teams in football, 63-14, and then they only beat Rice by 8 points after that. You take those 3 games out, their yards per play difference goes down quite some bit. And when you look at the conference play, yet Oklahoma's yards per play within the Big 12 conference is still a pretty big margin here. So this the game says stay away from me, and probably not going to have a side. And I totally get why you lean Oklahoma there, my man. Well, let's move into another crazy game here. We have Minnesota that just upset Penn State, and I'm kicking myself in the ass many times for not betting Minnesota because it was a strong lean for me, and I didn't. It was just a bad spot for Penn State. We saw Penn State, get through some teams by being outgained, and now Minnesota has to play Iowa, and Iowa's the favorite. Another 9-0 team coming in here, and over-under is only 44.5. Did you get a chance to look at this one?
I did. I thought this game Iowa -3. I thought maybe this would be closer to maybe Iowa -1 or closer to a pick 'em. Iowa, they struggle to score sometimes. Wisconsin really gave them some opportunities last week with penalties and turnover and a game. I thought Wisconsin probably should have won that game by a touchdown the way they were playing. Stanley at quarterback has struggled at times. The run game has really been stifled when they don't get to play teams like Miami of Ohio, Rutgers, or Middle Tennessee. And then Hawkeyes average over 5 yards per carry against those opponents, but against everyone else, last week against Wisconsin, they averaged 3.8, but everyone else, they have an average of over 3.1 yards per carry against any other team this season. So Minnesota, they definitely outperforming Iowa on the offensive side of the ball. Morgan went 18 for 20 last week with 339 yards, really good. I'm a little worried with Minnesota on the road versus a more potent offense, but that wouldn't really, that's not going to come into play with Iowa here. They're not a very potent offense. So I'm worried maybe if they meet up against Ohio State in the championship game, I'm not sure they can hang with them. I'm not sure many teams can hang with them. So, but outside of the Penn State game last week, it's not been a really difficult schedule for Minnesota. So I'm not sure how much they've been challenged. Penn State got the turnovers last week, probably wins that game last week. So, the teams that have similar numbers on defense, Iowa's probably been tested more. Iowa last season blew out Minnesota in Minnesota 48-31. So you got two scenarios here, one being a revenge for the loss last season for Minnesota, or possibly is Minnesota going to come out flat on the road after that monumental win last week? They're so close to the end of the season, I can't imagine they're going to come out flat. They're two games away basically from probably a chance to play in the Big Ten championship. So, I just don't think Iowa hasn't shown enough on offense. So I lean toward Minnesota to cover the 3 here on the road.
Yeah, so this is a strange spread too because I have it at Pick'em exactly because I have Minnesota 3 points better in my power ratings roughly. Yeah, about that, whatever. The thing is for me is that I wanted to bet Iowa, but not at -3. That kind of factors in. Well, see, if you look at the public power ratings out there, they have these two teams pretty, I guess, pretty equal. Yet Iowa that gives Iowa the 3 points for being at home. But I have Minnesota a better team, and yet it's -3. What screwed me here is that I wanted to fade Minnesota because Minnesota wins this game, they do go to the Big Ten championship because Wisconsin has 2 losses. It don't matter if they lose to Wisconsin at home. This is it, and they have the pressure of that. They haven't experienced anything like that. This is a huge pressure spot, and it's also a huge letdown spot for beating a team like Penn State, undefeated, ranked number 4 Penn State. A team like Ohio State can deal with something like that. A team with like Michigan can deal with something like that, but a team like Minnesota that hasn't been in this situation before, this is where the letdown really comes in. So I look at it, and that's where I bring the spread up to 3 points, and it's already 3 points. So I'm like, what the hell? I'm looking at the yards per play. Now, it's true that the Gophers have had a very easy schedule, but anybody not named Rutgers, they gave up over 31 points away, and that's Fresno State and Purdue. They only had 3 away games, Rutgers, Fresno State, and Purdue, and now they finally have another away game, and it's at a much better team in Iowa. Purdue was beat to hell when they played them. Minnesota also benefited by playing Nebraska without Martinez is quarterback there. Exactly. So there's a lot to be said. So the way I look at it is I kind of like the over. I kind of do. Yeah, Minnesota does have that power offense. I think they're going to get some points, but I think Iowa's going. This is the game they're finally going to score a bunch of points again, and it looks crazy. But this over hovering around 44 and a half tells me that the over is aside. It's not going down to normal Iowa overs, which are 41-40, right?
Sure.
So in my opinion, I think Iowa personally wins the game, but I also like the over, and a correlated parlay wouldn't be the worst thing either. I think if Minnesota keeps it anywhere close, you're going to see 50 points here scored. So I'm going to take the over in this game, and it's a like for me for sure. Let's move on to a big SEC matchup, and holy cow, Georgia had that terrible loss against South Carolina, just awful. Auburn's already lost 2 games. Auburn is kind of in the Wisconsin mode now. They're the spoiler. They won a big bowl game, but they ain't going nowhere, losing to Florida and LSU. But Auburn, the spread's about 2.5, 3-ish. There's some sharp money that hit on Auburn, I noticed. 40.5 is the over-under. And I'll start with this one, Alan. I have Georgia as a 2-point favorite here, my power rating, so no big thing for me. But Georgia does control their own destiny now. Now that they saw that Alabama lost, they realize that since it's Bama that lost, not LSU, that they could possibly get into the championship game and win it all. It's there's enough teams with one loss now, and it wasn't like that when they first lost to Notre Dame. Bo Nix has shown well at home. He seems to play at home, and Auburn has had the harder schedule, but Georgia's got more talent and experience. They have that awesome offensive line. I have a lean to Georgia here, but I don't think I have a play. Did you even get a chance to look at this one?
Looked at a little bit. I didn't have a lot of interest in it. Georgia. What does impress me about Georgia is the offense really hasn't been what we expected it to be necessarily, but they have been pretty good on the road. They beat Florida by a touchdown. They whooped on Tennessee. They beat them 43-14, and then they beat Vanderbilt 30-7. I mean, they should beat Vanderbilt, but they beat them 30-6. Mm-hmm. Auburn struggled at home last week against Ole Miss. They've looked good at times. I don't have a lot to add. They went to LSU. They only lost by 3, covered that spread of 11. They had a nice blowout win at Arkansas. Now they went to Florida and lost by 11, so that's a common opponent. So you look at that a little bit. It's a touch. I mean, what did you say? You had it at 4?
I have it at 2. So I have it really close to the spread right now, but I have a lean to Georgia. And it's 2 just based upon my power ratings, but at the same time, I think Kirby Smart's the kind of guy that doesn't blow games to the big dance or the big championship games, SEC championship, whatever, college football playoffs. I think he doesn't blow games to there. I think he blows those games, the later ones. I think this is one that they'll get up and play, and Jake Fromm will show his experience, in my opinion. So I went. If I was going to play Georgia, it wouldn't be based on my power ratings. It'd be based upon the spot and the talent and the fact that Bo Nix is a freshman. But at the same time, if Georgia have they played a running quarterback really yet? Not really. Florida doesn't have a running quarterback. I mean, who have they played that has a guy that's more elusive like a Bo Nix? So
sure,
that's my problem here. And Auburn does have a huge interior. If Swift can't get any yards, then they're in a little bit of trouble. Maybe that's why I didn't bet it. So notice how I talk myself on and off things.
Yeah, I didn't have it. It wasn't a game I spent a lot of time on. I looked at it and I could see it either way, really. So it wasn't something I was going to spend a lot of time on this week.
All right, well, fair enough. Well, let's move on to a huge Big Ten game. This one's a nice little rivalry here. Michigan State versus Michigan. The spread was at 14. It's at 13.5 where I'm seeing it here. Over-under is at 44, my man. Did you get a chance to look at this one?
Looked at a little bit. I would lean toward Michigan in this one. Michigan State just has not shown me really anything. It's hard to back Michigan State. Now, if you look at the history, the road teams won the last 4, and Michigan State's 10-1 against the spread the last 11 meetings. So there's a lot of history there for Michigan State, but this is not the same Michigan State team. They don't look very good. They're 0-5 against the spread their last 5. Quarterback, I mean, Lewerke just, to me, hasn't progressed at all. He's had two touchdown passes and 5 interceptions over his last 4. Offense has 13 turnovers as a team in that span. So they just don't have any kind of momentum or mojo right now. And that defense is still playing pretty good, but when they're not outmanned versus like Ohio State and Wisconsin, but the turnovers and the inconsistent play at quarterback really hurts them right now. Not really statistically, not a lot for this game. It's just a kind of what you see and just kind of what you feel as far as the team's really trending in 2 different directions right now. Michigan's probably going to come out and play solid defense. Lewerke turning the ball over. If they turn the ball over, give Michigan a couple of short fields here, I think Michigan State's going to have trouble getting the ball in the end zone to begin with. So it may be close. Maybe, I could see Michigan blowing them out, and I could see Michigan, covering toward the end in the fourth quarter. I could see it either way, really.
Right. Yeah. And, what I've seen out of Michigan lately has kind of been more confidence. Obviously they handled Maryland very easily, but they have the bye week and they're going into playing Michigan State. Michigan State had a big lead against Illinois, and I had Illinois and on the money line. I turned it, sure. I switched it to even look at it. I look at it again, and things almost tied, and Illinois wins it outright. I was happy about that. Michigan State's been terrible against the spread, 0-5 their last 5. And you're right. Michigan State is kind of fake news. And everyone was so high on Michigan State before the season started, and I wasn't. But because everyone was high on them, I didn't bet their season win total under, kind of kicking myself a little bit for that one. But Michigan has been something snapped in them when they beat Notre Dame. And here's Harbaugh. Here's the thing. That guy, he doesn't care who you are or what you do. He's going to run up the score on you. You saw them do that to Notre Dame.
Yep.
They did it against Maryland, and he just doesn't stop because that's what he wants his kids to do. And I think it's a BS thing to do. Personally, I don't like it at all, but that's just the way he is. So I can see him making a statement against Michigan State, trying to scare Ohio State or whatever. And I just think that Michigan has the defense lately holding Notre Dame to 7 points there or something? No, 14. They
14.
They had a garbage touchdown at the end. And then Maryland, they held them to 7 points, obviously. Penn State, they held them the whole second half. It actually started at that second half of the Penn State game, and I didn't like the officiating in the first half personally, but they would have that one more quarter, they would have beat Penn State. So in my opinion, I think Michigan has a definite chance to run this up. The problem is you're looking at a rivalry and you're looking at a double-digit spread here. So I have a lean to Michigan in this one, and that's probably – and I actually probably would like the under too because 44 I just think Michigan State, there's a chance they might not score more than 10 points.
I agree.
All right, my man. Well, let's get into a couple NFL games. I know your time's a little short here, but we're going to talk about the Chicago Bears versus the LA Rams. The Rams are about 6.5 point favorites. Over under is about 41.5, my man. So I think you and I know the Bears pretty well, don't we, Alan?
Yeah, I'm a Bears fan and not happy with what's going on this season. I don't understand. I think twice this year they passed the ball over 50 times in a game while they attempted to run less than 10. So I hope Nagy has learned his lesson on that. It looks like last week they kind of simplified things for Trubisky. The Rams, who knows what? I mean, they don't look good at all. They're not running the ball. They didn't look good against Pittsburgh last week. I mean, Pittsburgh, it shouldn't have been as close as it was. Pittsburgh gave them a give-me touchdown on a bad snap early in the game. Other than that, LA they had trouble moving the ball against Pittsburgh. I think last year when they met up, I believe Trubisky or Goff, neither one had a very good game last year. I think one of them threw 4 interceptions, the other threw 3. So I believe the Bears won that one. Yeah, they won that one 15-6. And I mean, I think it's going to be another ugly game. I think two pretty good defenses and a couple of offenses that, this isn't the Rams offense of last year. It's not, they're not moving the ball like they were. Gurley's knee, They're only averaging 3.2 yards per carry the last 3 games, and only averaging 3.9 for the season. So I don't really have if I had to play it, I would take Chicago plus near the touchdown, but I don't have a really good feel for this. It could go either way, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the Rams. I think there's some there's a lot of info on McVay's plays. That play action ain't fooling a lot of people now. And plus, why would you bite for the play action when your offensive line is doing much worse and Gurley hasn't done anything anyway? I mean, there's no reason to bite for it.
I noticed that I've come across a stat. Earlier in the season, when Zeke Elliott was holding out, there was a lot of talk about the halfback position being devalued and how you could just sign a guy and plug him in, and it didn't make a difference. Well, I looked last year, and of the 21 worst rushing teams in the NFL last year, only 19 of them missed the playoffs. Only 2 out of the worst 21 made the playoffs, and I believe it was Indianapolis was one of them. And then the Eagles were the other one. And the Eagles finished 28th last year. And they struggled. They got into the playoffs, but it wasn't the same year like they had the Super Bowl season. In the Super Bowl season, they finished 3rd in rushing. So, when you become one-dimensional and teams can sit on that pass, it does make a difference. And neither of these teams are running the ball particularly well. The Rams at least were accustomed to it last year. And now they're trying to adjust. And, it affects your offense when you're one-dimensional.
Absolutely, and another reason that they're going to be more one-dimensional against the Bears is that Brandon Cooks is not going to play this game. He's the one that stretches the field out. He's the one that keeps your safeties honest. Now they can probably run more safety blitz, stack a little bit more in the box, and I know they got Woods to deal with, but they really have to rely on their tight ends more this game. They got to rely on Kendricks and Higbee.
And Higbee's questionable, so.
Yeah. So the injuries are real bad. As a matter of fact, I think they lost 2 offensive linemen last game too, if I remember properly here.
Havenstein and who was the other one?
Yeah.
Was it
Kelly or something?
Allen, maybe Allen.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. I think that. Yeah, Brian Allen. Yeah, Brian Allen and Rob Havenstein. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, against the Bears defensive line, even without Akeem Hicks, they still have Williams there, and they still, obviously Floyd's there. He's going to be blitzing his butt off. If
they're going to pressure him,
yeah, they're going to be definitely pressing hard, and I know that the Bears will be without Trevathan, but Kwiatkowski's been playing great. He's been fantastic, and so I don't think they lose a beat there. And Khalil Mack, all it takes is a little bit to rattle golf, and it throws him off his game. That's why I kind of lean the Bears. But here's looking at the other direction. The Bears are a minus 0.5 in net yards per play, while the Rams, even though they're not doing great this year, are a plus 0.7. And their schedules have been about equal. So if you look at that, that's more like a net 1.2 yards per play. That's like 7 points, 8 points right there, plus the home field advantage, which is small in LA, but that's past 6.5. That's what keeps me off the Bears here, is that they can be completely incompetent. And what pisses me off is Mitch, he's not running the ball. Without the running threat that Mitch used to have, he becomes he doesn't have any reads. He can't really read the other routes, and when he does, he overthrows them. He's got one read, and that's it feels like. So, and it's kind of like what happened to Cam Newton. When Cam Newton could run the ball, he was an MVP-type player. When the threat of him running the ball was gone, he is not accurate at all. He's not Russell Wilson. He's not Lamar Jackson. It's just different. I think the same thing kind of happened to Kaepernick a while back, too. Sure. He kind of lost his running ability. He ran a ton with Harbaugh. So that's what happened to Mitch. I don't know why you're making him a pocket passer, but I guess maybe his left shoulder's messed up or something. But, at the same time, this is not the time to experiment. You should have been doing that during the preseason when you didn't frickin' play anybody, And now you're in the regular season and you feel like you're starting from day one. Well, I personally would like to see if Mitch doesn't get his first read, he at least looks to run the ball. If he can't dump it off correctly and overthrow Tariq Cohen 10 yards above his head. So that's what worries me. But what doesn't worry me, Alan, is the first half freaking under. And I'll tell you why. The Bears average 8 points in the first half, which is it's like the top 3 lowest in all of football. If you notice, the only game they scored a bunch in the first half was the Washington Redskins, and it was like 30 points. So that game actually skews it. That if you take that outlier off, it's probably more like 5 points in the first half. And I also think that obviously the Rams are going to take it easy. They're not going to want to throw some interceptions. They're probably going to try to run the ball a little bit more since they're not going to be able to protect Goff. I love the first half under 20.5, and I actually kind of like the full game under 41.5. So any final thoughts on that one?
Yeah, you look at the Rams and probably the two best defenses they played since the first couple weeks of the season. They San Francisco, and then last week against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's D's playing really well. They could only score 12 at Pittsburgh, and they only were able to score 7 at home to San Francisco. So I think the Bears come in, they fit that mold as far as defense goes. The key will be probably not turning the ball over, giving the Rams a short field and play that field position game with them.
Yeah, and if there's one thing Trubisky hasn't done in the first half is turn the ball over. And he actually hasn't done it in a while, but I could still see him fumbling the ball if he's down 7 points in the fourth quarter, throwing a pick six or fumble touchdown. I could see that happen. So that's why I like the first half a little bit better. But the Bears have still 4.9 yards per play type defense, and they're kind of wasting that a little bit with a 4.5 yards per play offense or whatever. So I kind of wish that would get a little bit better. But obviously it's pretty bad, and we know that Mitch has the size, he has the arm strength, and he has the speed, a decent release, but he needs to have the smarts and the accuracy, and if you don't have that has bust all over it. So it's wearing thin on Mitch, my man.
His coaching staff needs to try to acquiesce to his strengths instead of trying to conform him into the next coming of Tom Brady, which he's never going to be. He'll probably be a game manager at best, which is okay if you can play defense and you can run the ball. And that's the thing. The Bears, I thought they'd be able to run the ball a little bit this season, and they've gotten a little better, but they're still not running it like I thought they would. And I'm seeing Montgomery listed as questionable Sunday as well with an ankle injury. So
exactly, don't force it. Let him take off with his legs. Let him get down. Russell Wilson does it a ton. I mean, Lamar Jackson. You can do it without getting hit if you're smart about it. You just go down before the defender. Who cares if you don't have the first down? Just go down. It's a huge part of keeping the linebackers honest. Let the second and third reads come to him. Let the check downs come to him later. Even if they don't, you're right, Alan. He's going to be a game manager. That's fine. If he's got a little speed, don't turn the ball over. You can win on that. Totally agree. Well, we have time for one more game here. And I know you got to roll. The Buffalo Bills playing the Miami Dolphins. Miami's laying about 5.5 at home. The over-under is 41. Have you got a chance to look at this one?
Well, I glanced at it. I opened at 6.5. I've got it down to 6 now. So, boy, I can't. I couldn't. I mean, I won't play the game, but if I had to take a side, I'd probably take a go at Miami here. They're neither team really. If you look at the last three, if you look at the averages for the teams, the last 3 games, they're almost identical. Miami's at 18.7, Buffalo's at 17.7 points scored, and then they both allowed right around 19 points a game. So Buffalo doesn't come in and blow out too many teams, especially going on the road. Miami's hot now. If you're hot for Miami, I suppose 2 games in a row. We didn't know if they were going to win 2 games the entire season. They've won their last 2. I don't have a solid side on this, but if I had to play this, I would definitely be more comfortable taking a chance with Miami in a low-scoring game versus expecting Buffalo or depending on Buffalo to come out and score points.
I see that. I mean, the over-under is 41, so usually want to look more at the dog when they have a low total here. The weird thing about this is the spread was over 10 points like 3 weeks ago, right? I mean, it's just then all of a sudden the truth comes out on the Bills. They're a little bit of fake news.
Sure.
And then Miami wants to play out of their minds a little bit. They caught a little bit of luck, but Fitzmagic is Fitzmagic and just takes a couple plays, and you wait for it to all come crumbling down, and you wonder if this is the game. I think the book's more out on Buffalo. Josh Allen's a terrible passer past 30 yards. I mean, he can't do it. I think he has 0 completions or something over 40 yards or 35 or something. I can't remember what it is, but that's not good. And the defenses are knowing that they don't have to go too deep on him. And secondly, they're kind of spying him a little bit. He's one of those guys that was like Mitch, runs with his legs. He's fast and big, powerful, so the book's out on him, and that's what's screwing up Buffalo a little bit. My power ratings have this as a 9-point favorite, but I guess I'm wondering if you can give Miami 3 points for home field to take it down to 6. That's what I wondered, is that do they really get 3 points? A lot of people go down to Miami as Buffalo Bills fans. It's one of their fun things to do. They don't go to New York Jets, they go down to Miami because they have a shot to freaking win, and B, it's not the Patriots. They're not going to lose, so that's important, and so they want that little late November, mid-November vacation out in Miami Beach. That's never a bad thing, and Miami's never had that good of a home field advantage, especially this year. And another thing, Alan, why the hell is Miami trying to win right now? What the hell are you accomplishing? Because right now you're ahead of the Jets, I believe, in your division, and you're ahead of Cincinnati, and I think Washington might be below you too. You're blowing your draft pick.
They're going to end up at 4 or 5 if they're not careful.
If they're not freaking careful. And what do they need most? They need, an edge rusher and a quarterback. They need a real franchise quarterback. Josh Rosen, I don't even know why they traded for him last year. I was like, are you kidding me? A 2nd-round pick for Josh Rosen? Did you see him last year play for the Cardinals? So I was just like, what a bunch of terrible decisions. But right now they're making the terrible decision of winning when their fans probably want them to lose. If there's no chance of making the playoffs, I don't want my team to win. I want them to have a good draft pick or to trade down to get more picks. That's what I care about. So I don't know what they're doing there. Tua is going to come out, and I don't know if Tua is the man or not. But there's a lot of good guys coming out, and Joe Burrow might be one of them. And so I think he's eligible this year. I'm not 100% sure, but he did sit in Ohio State one year, played last year for LSU, so I think he could come out. And obviously the kid from Oregon too. So Miami might. We don't want them to screw that up. We'll see what they're going to do there. But I didn't play the game, bud, either. I just wanted to kind of talk about that. And I'm going to watch this spread a little bit more. All right, my man. Well, that's about all the time we have. Thanks so much for coming on, Alan. I really appreciate it. Make sure you guys find him at the Cashman Wins.
Thanks, Kiev.
All right, my friends. And now it's time for me to add my free plays for college and NFL football. We're going to start right out with college football week 12, and we're going to start with Indiana versus Penn State. Penn State's laying about 15.5. Over under is roughly, I believe, 55, something like that. Anyways, Penn State, they were upset last week, and there's some of their issues were exposed, I think, a little bit. The truth of the fact is that unlike Michigan and Wisconsin, they can actually control their own destiny. They can. For the most part, okay? If they win out and beat, obviously, Ohio State, and then they beat Wisconsin or Minnesota in the Big Ten championship, they're certainly going to make the college football playoffs due to Oklahoma's worst loss to Kansas State and Georgia's worst loss to South Carolina. They should get in over Oregon. So even if Oregon wins out, I'll tell you this, it's going to be real tough for the committee to put one SEC team in. And most likely it's going to be Penn State. But I think Penn State isn't going to be as focused on this game, okay? Even though you would think this should be a big bounce back spot. They're coming back home. They should destroy Indiana. Well, if they beat Indiana by 100 points and they lose to Ohio State, they're still not going to be in it. All right. They're still not going to have the non-conference schedule it's going to take. So that would be a big issue for them. They're not exactly going to be looked at as Alabama, who lost to LSU and come in, because they have a loss to Minnesota. So they're going to be looking past Indiana a little bit. I like Indiana and how they have a 1.3 net yards per play. Love what Tom Allen's doing over there. Now Penn State, their yards per play is 1.9, 0.6 advantage for the Nittany Lions. But the fact that Indiana's done well on the road against Michigan State, they were in that game the whole time, and the Michigan State won at the end. They did well against Maryland, and they kept getting better, and they did well at Nebraska. It gives me confidence to take them as an over 2 touchdown dog here. Penn State should be looking past them to Ohio State a little bit, and Indiana, I think they can score the ball here. So don't be surprised if this game's closer than you think. And also, like the fact that old Peyton Ramsey's going to be playing this game, and he's doing pretty well. 72% completion. Michael Penix has probably a better threat deeper, but Peyton Ramsey has been playing for years, and he knows this team well. He knows the system very well, and I like Penn State to cover the over 2 touchdowns. So I don't like it. I like it to 14.5, and 14 probably the lowest, but I won't go too far under that. Next game. Oh, by the way, this is about a 3-star premium shared play. Indiana plus 15.5 is what I played. Central Michigan versus Ball State. Ball State is laying 2.5 points. Over under is, well, I took it at 57.5. It's at 59 right now. Obviously, let the cat out of the bag. Looking at this game, I think there are 2 things to look at here. The fact that both teams average over 30 points per game, and the fact that both teams give up a decent amount of points to below average teams, 27 for Central Michigan and 30 to Ball State. But both of these teams are actually above average on offense. Well, I mean, for power group of 5 teams, there should be motivation on both sides here, because there's a huge tie for first place in the MAC West with 4 of those teams at 2 losses, and that includes these 2. So these teams are going to want to win this game. They're going to want to put up some points here. Being that both these teams play at an above average pace, I like the over, and that's why it's crept up to 59. But I like it all the way to 62. Get it quick. We are taking the over in the Central Michigan Ball State game. My number was 57.5, but I'm giving it to you also at 59, 3-star premium shared play.
Show me the money!
Next game, we already covered it, but I'm going to cover it some more. So it is the Minnesota versus Iowa, and like I said, I took the over. The big thing for me is that Minnesota averages 38 points per game and 6.4 yards per play. They are going to put some points up against Iowa. But Iowa is going to as well, because like I said, Iowa's schedule ranked a lot harder, and they average 24 points a game, and their schedule ranks 24th in the nation. Minnesota's schedule ranks 70th. So I see points from both sides. I really like the over 44.5, but I'm also going to give out a small little correlated parlay. I'm going to take Iowa on the money line, and it's probably going to be around minus 140. And we're going to take the over 44.5. I think it's at 44 at some books as well, whatever you get it at. And correlate that parlay. And that parlay should pay around 2.2, 2.3 to 1. being that a normal 2-game parlay pays at 2.6 per one. So a small play on that, maybe like a half unit while you're doing your normal 1.5 star play, 1.5 units on the over 45.5. Woo! All right, now let's get into a little NFL Week 11 action here. And we're going to start out with Arizona versus San Francisco. San Francisco's laying 11.5, over-under is 45. The over-under is very telling to me in this game because it says that the 49ers will likely, they're likely going to have some decent defense here, as usual, but they might struggle a bit on offense. Okay? That's the strange thing about this line. I felt the over-under should be higher, and here's why. Well, first of all, the Cardinals are averaging 22.2 points per game. Very average. I think it's dead in the middle, while they give up 28 on defense on a very hard schedule. The 49ers average 29 points per game and just give up an average of 14. This tells me that the Niners should score at least 31 points here, being that the Cardinals give up plenty above average and the Niners score above average. And the Cardinals should score 18 or 19 points. As a matter of fact, you can even have the game 31-19 just based upon what they score and what they give up, right? And so there's your 11.5, 12-point spread here. But then why is the total so low? I mean, that total should be 50 points. Well, I'll tell you why. It's because the injuries on the 49ers here. The Niners are missing some key components in their offense. George Kittle, most likely out with a nasty bone bruise. And they lost, and they out there. 2 offensive linemen are still highly questionable, most likely out. They're out last few weeks, though. But Emmanuel Sanders is banged up. Matt Breida is highly questionable, and they're saying that he's going to miss next week's game. Tevin Coleman's going to have the full load. And they also are down a bunch of defensive players, a bunch of them. 2 defensive linemen, a linebacker, 2 linebackers actually now, because they lost Quan Alexander the week before. Oh, and obviously their kicker Gold's been out, and their next kicker missed a field goal. They're just really beat up. D Ford's questionable now. It's just a shell of that big team we were seeing through the stretch of the season here, and so that is why I believe Arizona is going to be able to put up some points here. So there should be no intimidation here to Arizona. They played this team, and they only lost by 3 points at home. So you can take that away. This is a rivalry game. My power ratings have this game around 9.5, factoring in the injuries. So I have no problem taking the 11.5. I actually took this as a premium play at 13.5 before the Monday night game. So I still like the Cardinals to cover below the 10.
Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
Next game, we actually covered already very well the Bears versus the Rams. Obviously, I'm taking the under 20.5. But I still like the full game a little bit for the under. So I'd say take half the size of your bet and play it under 41.5 here. Like I said before, the Bears, they're a little bit desperate here. I think their defense is going to show up. Their defense held the Rams last year as well to 6 points at Soldier Field. It's not really a revenge spot for anything because the Rams still made the playoffs and went to the Super Bowl. The truth is that McVay and this team has not been showing up, and this is just a perfect time for the Bears defense to kind of get back on track here. But as far as the first half under, I like it a little bit better because the Bears just don't seem to score in the first half. They seem a little bit careful with the ball. So At the same with Brandon Cooks being out, it really shrinks what the Rams can do. And big fan of the first half under as well as the full game. 1 star premium, 1.5 star premium on the first half, and like a 1 star just on the full game under 41.5 points. All right. The final game that we have a play for you is Atlanta versus Carolina. Carolina minus 5.5. Over under is 49.5. Have you noticed since Kyle Allen came aboard that Carolina's 2-0 at home since Kyle came, because the first 2 home games they lost with Cam. It's a good 2-0 because they weren't terrible teams they played. They played Jacksonville and Tennessee, kind of middle of the road, maybe slightly below average teams, but the games weren't close. And what's Atlanta? Atlanta's they're still probably celebrating right now that they beat the Saints and forgot the fact that they shouldn't have saved their coach, Dan Quinn. A big thing about what happened here is they lost their starting running back, Devonta Freeman. Okay? And I'm not sure that 4-string running back, Brian Hill, can make up for the routes and the blocking. And, he might look more like the comic Benny Hill out there. So Atlanta's bad at running the football, obviously. You've seen the stats. I think it's like 3.7 yards per rush or something. They're bad, and they're good at passing the ball, but here's where the handicap really matters, okay? Carolina is ranked 3rd out of all the teams in the football, including the Patriots, the Niners, Seattle, the Ravens, the Rams, the Bears, higher than most of them in defensive passing efficiency, okay? And that's a stat I look on Football Outsiders, and it's a big one that I use, okay? That means they can stop the pass pretty well. And I think they could win by double digits because of this. You have the Falcons in a letdown spot. The Falcons can't run the ball, and that's Carolina's weakness, yet they can throw the ball, but that's Carolina's strength, and Carolina's playing at home. Now, before the Saints upset from the Falcons last week and the Panthers' loss to the huge home field advantage of the Packers, this line was more of a 7.5 here. My power rings have it actually at 9.5. So 2 things agree with this. The passing defense of the Panthers and the power ratings. I like Carolina here, minus 5.5. I think this is short. I think it's short because of the overreaction that happened last week. Matty Ice will be on ice. Take Carolina minus 5.5, 3-star premium shared play. All right, my friends, since you guys are awesome, and I really love the fact that you listen to this podcast, you're amazing. I'm going to do a couple more NFL games here and some leans. For the Thursday night game, you have Pittsburgh versus Cleveland. This spread is Pittsburgh plus 2.5 now. It's actually more like it's at plus money, so it's more like plus 2.75 is the spread, or Cleveland minus 2.75, whatever. I think Pittsburgh's the right side in this game. I didn't bet it because my power ratings have it right around this number as it is. It's kind of perfect. But at the same time, look who's got the defense. Look who's rushing the quarterback. And look at the coach on the Cleveland Browns. It's not good. They got their big win last week. The Steelers are the Steelers. They're still going to look at the Browns as an inferior team. I think Pittsburgh could easily cover the 2.5 or possibly win this game outright. So it's a lean for me, but figured I'd give it to you. I lean the Steelers in this game. Saints versus the Bucks. The Bucks, I guess I got sick of betting on them, but how the hell are you going to fade the Saints at any point where they are coming off of a loss like that? I think they get it completely together. Alvin Kamara should be back playing this week. They should be getting more healthy. I think that's huge for New Orleans. And, Tampa Bay at the same time, they're a little bit beat up themselves. They have a couple linebackers, Nassib and Anthony Nelson, limited and not practicing. And, I think that the Saints lose a few people last game. Marshawn Lattimore is probably not going to play. And Andres Pete, their guard. But at the same time, in general, they're a pretty healthy team. I like Drew Brees coming back here, probably. Well, I lean it, So I lean the Saints as road favorites against a rivalry like Tampa Bay, -5.5. I obviously covered the Panthers. The Vikings, that spread's a little bit too high at 10.5. Slight lean to the Denver Broncos, plus 10.5 there. Washington Redskins and the Jets. The Redskins are going to have to get it right one of these days. Dwayne Haskins is now the starter here. I think maybe he might just have a good game finally. And I know the Redskins are bad, but Adrian Peterson is healthy. Derek Geis is back. And that Haskins has his buddy that plays with him from Ohio State at wide receiver. So that's going to be a good connection there. The Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. So this spread is bouncing between 4 and 4.5 here. Now, this it's not too far off of my power ratings here. I think I have it at 3.5 though. So I probably would have to lean the Houston Texans here. It's not a huge lean by any means, but I much would rather bet Bill O'Brien as a dog than a favorite. It kind of seems to be the role that fits him best. And let's do one more game here for you. One more lean. Looking at the Chiefs and the Chargers, the spread was 4, and now it's plus 3.5. Something's off with the Chiefs. Their defense has just been so banged up this year. The Chargers last year went to Kansas City and beat them outright, which was huge. So I know they have Clark back, but Okafor is questionable for the Chiefs. Eric Fisher is questionable, their tackle. I think the Chargers finally got healthy, and it looks like Melvin Gordon is finally running a lot better than he has. So probably leaning the Chargers at plus 3.5 at home. Now, I know they don't have a big home field advantage, but at the same time, they know how to beat Andy Reid. All right, my friends, and now it is time for
The Sharp Side of the Force.
The Sharp Side of the Force is brought to you by uwager.lv. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit uwager. Use the promo code OddsBreakers. All right, we're going to start right out with Sharp College. And we need 20% difference between the ticket totals and the money for us to call it out sharp. And we're going to start out right with Northern Illinois. Actually, sorry, this game is being played before this podcast. There was some sharp money on Northern Illinois this game. Buffalo versus Kent State. So I want to mention this because it went from -6 or -3.5 to -6 here. And Buffalo now was the sharp side, and now Kent State's starting to take money. So just want to show you that this one's flip-flopped a little bit. Now, it didn't go through any real key numbers. I guess 4 is kind of a key number, but I did want to mention that. We have sharp money on West Virginia at Kansas State from plus 15 to plus 14. We have money on Georgia Tech hosting Virginia Tech at plus 5.5, a 47% difference. 17% of the tickets are on Georgia Tech, meaning 83% of the tickets are on Virginia Tech. but 64% of the money is on Georgia Tech. So that is a sharp home dog right there. We have sharp money on Temple at +6, and that's a 20% difference between ticket total and money. We have sharp money on South Florida at +14, a 52% difference there, hosting Cincinnati. We have sharp money on Duke, hosting Syracuse at -10.5, a 40% difference. That's pretty big. Sharp money on Texas State, hosting Troy at +7.5, a 40% difference. Sharp money on New Mexico at Boise State at +28, a 20% difference. Sharp money on Colorado State +10.5, hosting Air Force. Wow. And that is a 23% difference between tickets and money. The money split at 50%, but only 27% of the tickets are on Colorado State. And sharp money on Georgia State at +16.5 against Appalachian State, a 36% difference. Georgia State's quarterback's out, I believe. So, don't want to touch that one too much. Sharp money on USC at Cal from -5 to -6.5, a 20% difference. Sharp money on Arizona at Oregon at +27, a 31% difference. Sharp money on UAB hosting UTEP from -17 to -18, a 27% difference. Sharp money on Iowa State hosting Texas from -6.5 to -7, a 23% difference. Don't really want to bet that one. That one kind of looks right to me. Sharp money on, sharp money. It's Stanford at Washington State at +10.5, a 38% difference. Is Stanford finally going to play well? It's been a while. Sharp college totals, and we need 30% here. Looking for the under, Fresno State at San Diego State, under from 45 down to 42.5, a 42% difference. Sharp money on the under, West Virginia at Kansas State from 50.5 down to 47.5, a 40% difference. And it doesn't look like these teams have much offense to give. Sharp money on the over, Louisiana Monroe at Georgia Southern, 57.5, a 38% difference there. Monroe puts up some points, doesn't have a good defense. Dual action on the UMass versus Northwestern under. Ugly. Under 56. 70% of the tickets on the under and 97% of the money. Sharp money on the Troy versus Texas State over 63, a 45% difference on that one. And I just got to tell you, I almost bet that one. 98% of the money is on the over on that one. And I guess, can you trust Texas State to score? But Troy's defense is so bad. Sharp money on the under, UCLA at Utah from 54.5 down to 52, a 36% difference. Sharp money on the under, ASU at Oregon State, under 57, a 54% difference there. Pretty big difference. Sharp money on USC at Cal's under 48. That one's actually only a 23% difference, so that doesn't really qualify here. Slightly sharp. Sharp money on South Carolina at Texas A&M, under 50.5, a 34% difference there. South Carolina hasn't been scoring that well, as you can see. Kind of agree with that one, actually. Sharp money on the Texas versus Iowa State over 66, a 33% difference there. Pretty significant. And there's dual action on the Kansas versus Oklahoma State over 67.5 came from 65 to 67.5. 84% of the tickets on the over, 93% of the money. Dual action on the over of Oklahoma versus Baylor's over 67.5. 78% of the tickets on the over, 96% of the money. And sharp money on the Memphis versus Houston under went from 72 down to 69. A 45% difference there. Memphis has a good defense. They score a lot, but they do have a good defense. Sharp money, actually dual action on the under. Kentucky at Vanderbilt. Under from 45 down to 41.5. 91% of the tickets on the under. 96% of the money is on the under. Sharp money on the Michigan State versus Michigan over 44. A 33% difference there. They expect Harbaugh to run up the score like me. Sharp money on the Southern Miss versus Texas San Antonio under. A 30% difference. And there you have it for the college football and NFL sides. We have sharp money on Tampa. Sharp money on Tampa Bay. That's correct. We have Tampa at plus 5.5, a 21% difference. Sharp money on Denver at Minnesota at plus 10.5. A 38% difference. I lean that one. Sharp money on San Francisco minus 11, 21% difference. So it first went from plus 14 down to plus 11, and then now it looks like the money's starting to build up towards on San Francisco's side here. I disagree with that, obviously. And that's it for spreads. For totals, sharp on the under, New Orleans versus Tampa Bay, under 50, a 43% difference. Sharp money on the under, Denver at Minnesota, under 40.5, a 43% difference. And it's slightly sharp on the over, Cincinnati at Oakland, over 48.5. It's at 26%, but that's the sharp side. Not quite at 30%, but I can tell. And the Bears actually at LA from 42 down to 40, a 28% difference. It's also sharp as well. All right, my friends. Want to thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Odds Breakers. If you'd like to contribute, if you're a handicapper, or if you'd like to blog for sports betting, please contact us at the Odds Breakers. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend and go get some